First step is to use our base coat sealer to seal the head. We want to get complete coverage with this, including the beak and the eyes. This is coat number 2. You can see I'm spraying it from a number of different angles to get on all different sides of the carnicles and the ridges on the head. We'll let it dry now for about a half hour. Now we're going to be using our Super Hide White to completely coat the entire head. With the Super Hide White, you want complete coverage over everything. Again, we're shooting it at different angles to make sure we get complete coverage. You may need to give it 2 coats. Now we're just taking some lacquer thinner on our brush and we're cleaning the white off the eye. We do it at this point so it doesn't build up, so when we do our final painting and our final eye cleaning, we don't have to spend too much time trying to remove paint from the eye. If we do that, you can slip up a little bit and you might take some paint off of your eye ring, so we like to get the bulk of the paint off now. You'll also notice I'm wearing gloves while we're doing this step, and all this painting steps helps to protect your hands from the lacquer-based paint we're using. And that's just the brush we use. Okay, now we're using our red mix. Not being too careful with this, we're just trying to get good coverage. We'll be coming back and touching this up later. This is the same red mix we use for the legs. The gill red and the golden yellow mix. And you can mix that however you want. Like a 5-to-1 ratio seems to work very good. Mix up a little bit and then test it. Again, you can see we are angle spraying down the back. We're going to be doing a lot of angle spraying. That gives our painting a lot of depth. Again, we're turning it a lot of different ways to make sure we get complete coverage over the major carnicles and the rest of the ridges on the head. Now this is our Sailfish Blue and Super Hide White mix. We're just angle spraying the other way from the red. Again, what this is giving us is a lot of depth. We're hitting the other side of the ridges from the red. And as the red and our blue-white mix meets, you get purple, which is a really nice effect. It helps to tie the entire head together. Again, with the blue mix, you want to test that. There's not an exact formula. It depends on how much blue of the look you want. A lot of times a 5-to-1 mix will work very well for that. We've got our blue again. Now we're painting on the face and around the eye. Again, the color on this can be white, it can be this baby blue color, it can be purple, it can be dark blue. They vary considerably on turkeys. For most of my mounts, I like to make it kind of this baby blue look, and then just put a hint of red back into it to turn it just slightly to purple. If you recall, we did have some red laid down there first, and that's what kind of gives it that purpley look. Okay, now we're just spraying on the very top of the head with a little bit of blue in the center area. We're going to be putting white on both sides of the top of the head, but if you get a little bit in the center, it gives it a nice effect. Okay, we're just going to clean the paint off of our eyes again. We do this throughout the process so it doesn't build up. We just do the other eye the same way. You can see the red and white paint coming off of it as we're cleaning off the blue. Now we're going to be just working with our airbrush a little bit. These are some practices you can do before we do the painting between the ridges. This is just practice spotting a little bit. What we're doing is we're turning the cone on the Pache H airbrush, and that controls the amount of flow and controls the size of our dot or our line. So before you do this next step, you might want to practice a little bit like this if you're not used to using an airbrush. And again, we're doing the same with our red-orange mix. There's some practice stuff you can try out. What's nice about a Pache H is they're very simple airbrush to use. There's just a few controls you have to worry about. So if you're new to airbrushing, I would definitely recommend getting a Pache H with an H1 tip. You could use an H3 tip for some of the broad spray areas if you wanted. Now we're coming back in with our white, and we're just spraying between those ridges. And again, this is giving us that depth I'm always talking about. We did our angle spraying before with the red and the blue. Now we're coming back in with our white. This is really defining the area between those ridges and giving the head a tremendous amount of detail and depth. It's much better than just going in there and statically painting blue between the red. It really helps to give the head a soft, natural look. And you might need to practice a little bit with this step. Just take it slow as you're getting started. You can see here we're moving pretty quick. But it isn't a race, take your time. Again, what's nice with a turkey head, if you do mess up a little bit, it's not a real big deal. Because turkey heads vary so much, you can have white and red and blue over the entire head in different areas at different times. And if all else fails, you can always re-white out the entire head and start over. Okay, now we're back with our red. We're just going on the top of some of the carnicles and the ridges where that white oversprayed a little bit. And you can see it a little bit better in this frame. You can vary this up too. You could use blue where we're putting red. You could keep it white. It's all natural. But most people want a red, white, and blue turkey head. So we have a standard way we paint them, and people seem to like it and it works out well. Again, we're painting on the top of the ridges here. As you get down towards the major carnicles, you'll see some other taller ridges and bumps. You can hit those with red to accent them. If your airbrush starts to spit a little bit when you're doing this step, you might need to stop and clean it up. Take the tip off, put in lacquer thinner. You might be getting clogged up a little bit. You'll find that a lot in fish painting when you're spotting. If you don't have a real clean airbrush, you can start getting spitting. It's normally not as big of a deal with a turkey head though. Again, we're defining everything pretty heavy here, as you can see. People really tend to like that, a well-defined head, where you can really see the delineation between the red, white, and the blue. So we're hammering the red on fairly heavily. Now we're just touching up a little bit around the face area with red, where we had a little bit of white overspray. Touching up around the beak a little bit. On the snoot a little bit more. Again, with the snoot, that can vary color-wise too. Normally we make ours red, but you want the transition area where it goes into the top of the head white to start to fade into pink, and then put a little bit of blue there too, so it gets a purpley look. Doing a little bit more touch up. Okay, now we're going to paint the eye rings red. Again, they can be blue, they can be white, or they can be purple, they can be red. Most of the time people paint them red, so we're going to paint them red for the sake of this video. Okay, we've got our blue mix back. Now we're going in between, over the white with our blue mix, between the ridges on the head. Just the same spot we put the white before. We're not completely filling it up, we're just going in the center of our white, and that gives it a lot of depth and character. We're also coming into our red a little bit. It's giving it kind of a purpley look as it's moving towards the front of the head. There's no static lines. That's the big thing here we're trying to do with painting this. You don't want a definite start and stop point other than the ridges on the back of the head. As you saw how we painted them, you're looking at them right now. Those are fairly delineated out because it's a look people tend to like. But if you look at strutting turkeys, they can have this look, and they can also have a look where it's a little bit less defined. It's completely up to you how you want to paint it. This is the accepted method that most people paint their turkey heads and most customers prefer. We're just cleaning up around the eye ring a little bit from where we sprayed our red. Okay, and we've got our white back again. We're painting the beak completely white. We're cleaning up all that red overspray. You can see we're getting a little bit of white on the snoot. We'll come back and touch that up in a second. Okay, now we've got our white again. And what we're doing here is we are painting on the very top of the head. We're just putting that white back in from some of our red that had oversprayed over it. Again, you could keep it that red. You could keep it blue. But most of the time people like it if it's a little bit more towards white. Again, this is the super hide white. It's polytranspar. And we're just cleaning up some of that overspray. We're keeping a little bit there though, as you can see. We're not completely getting rid of that overspray. You don't want to do that. It gives it a lot more character if there's some red and blues working through that whole area. Okay, we've got our red back. Now we're doing our touch-up. This is the overspray from when we painted white on the beak. You might have to come back and do this a few times back and forth. That's common. It's just like fish painting. You're cleaning up overspray. Overspray happens. Okay, now we have just golden yellow in our airbrush, and we're just going to be misting that over the beak just slightly. We just want to bring it out of that super hide white just a touch towards yellow. You don't want a yellow beak, not too much, just a little. Now we have blending brown, and what we're going to do with that is we're going to spray at the area where the beak meets the head and in the nostril area. If you look at reference pictures of turkeys, that area is always dark. We're just kind of fading it into the beak a little bit more. Okay, now we have our brush back with our lacquer thinner. And we have to clean off the eyes again. This will be the final time we clean off the eyes. It's much easier now though, because we've been cleaning them off throughout the process. We don't have a big buildup of white on there, and blues and reds. And as you're cleaning it off, you want to get into the corner of the eye a little bit. You just kind of angle your brush in there. You don't want to get too much lacquer thinner on your brush at one time. That's very important. It can run on you and it'll ruin some of your paint job. So just a little bit on your brush, dab it off on a paper towel, and then clean off your eye. If you need more lacquer thinner, repeat the process again. Cleaning off our other eye. Okay, now we have our base coat sealer again, and we're going to go ahead and give the head 3 coats of our sealer, letting it dry about 5 minutes between coats. It's going to look very shiny when we're done, but because it's a sealer and not a gloss, it's not going to hold that shine. After a few days and a little bit of handling, it will go away. And now we have our finished head. As you can see, this is a fairly fast way to paint it. It puts a lot of color into the head. That base coat sealer also really helps to hold that paint on, which is very important.